Hello, welcome. This is a session, Challenges in Community-Led Archives, Perspectives in Community Memory and Digital Libraries. My name is Charlotte Nunes. I'm Director of Digital Scholarship Services at Lafayette College Libraries. I'm here with Gabriel Solis, Executive Director of the Texas After Violence Project. We're going to give a 10-minute presentation, and it will be pre-recorded, and it will be followed by a live Q&A. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Gabe.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Gabriel Solis. As Charlotte said, I run the Texas After Violence Project. We are a small nonprofit organization based in Austin, Texas, but doing work statewide and even outside of Texas sometimes. Originally, we focused on collecting oral histories related to the death penalty, and in recent years have really expanded our mission to do memory work and community-based archival work related to the impacts of state violence broadly. So we're a small organization that is, trying to respond to the needs of our community and to the constantly changing landscape of community resistance against state violence, particularly mass incarceration, police violence, immigration enforcement, and the death penalty, as I mentioned before. In 2009, we formed a partnership with the Human Rights Documentation Initiative at UT Libraries, and that partnership in those days was really essential in the early days of the organization, because we, even now as a small independent nonprofit, funding is difficult as it is for many nonprofits. And so we needed to know that even if our small organization, for some reason, no longer existed, that our materials that we collected, these incredibly important stories that we have documented over the years, would still be preserved and accessible for the long term. And so we formed this excellent partnership with the Human Rights Documentation Initiative, alongside other collections like the Guatemala National Police Archive and the Genocide Archive of Rwanda. In recent years, since we've expanded our mission and we've grown our team and we've taken on more and more oral history and archival projects, we have found that in many ways we needed more autonomy for our digital collection. Part of the problem with the partnership with HRDI is that once the grant that the UT Libraries received to develop the HRDI, once those grant funds were exhausted, it seems like there was very little staffing in order to support the HRDI and its community partners. And so they were also using a outdated audio visual platform that was really difficult for people in our community to access some of those materials. One thing that we talk about a lot at our organization is not just building an archival collection for the sake of researchers and educators, although that is a main part of our mission, is the public education piece, but really to make sure that activists, organizers, and advocates have quick access to the stories and other materials that we include in our collection. And we were having problems with that with the outdated audiovisual platform that HRDI had implemented in the early 2000s. The other piece of this that I think is important, and my colleague Jane Field, who runs our archival program at TAVP, she makes a good point in a blog post that she just published a couple of days ago, introducing our new autonomous digital repository called the After Violence Archive. And she talks about how although the HRDI and the UT Library staff are really essential to support the mission of organizations like TAVP or those other partner collections that I mentioned, the Genocide Archive of Rwanda, it's impossible to separate the work of the HRDI, the incredible digital archivists and librarians that we work with day to day, from the broader institution that they're a part of. And that becomes increasingly difficult for an organization like ours to justify when that institution perpetuates actions and behaviors that are inconsistent with our values, our principles, and our visions as a community-based organization fighting for an end to state violence and fighting for transformative justice. So we've increasingly have been coming to the realization that not just technically, not just on principle, but we have to have more autonomy for some of the decision-making that goes into how our materials in our collection are preserved, how they're described, and how they're made accessible, how they're used publicly, etc. What's really important for us is bringing in the viewpoints and the perspectives and the needs of the people who are directly impacted by state violence. And so toward that end, in recent years, we have launched a community council, a group of members of our community who advise us on different aspects of our archival work. We just launched the Visions After Violence Fellowship for directly impacted people to do memory work in our community around our issues. And finally, we have a community advisor position that helps guide this aspect of our work too. So I'll just wrap up by saying that, as a small organization that doesn't have the resources to fully manage and implement a digital repository, we're very much interested in trying to develop equitable and mutually beneficial partnerships with institutional archival partners if possible. I'll stop there. Thanks, Charlotte.
So as Gabe pointed out, there are several dimensions of the broader conversation about capacity building and sustainability in community-led archives. I would point to the recent Society of American Archivists recorded panel titled Community Archives Collaborative, Transforming Archival Work with Community-Based Archives, for an excellent overview of these dimensions. As an academic library, a librarian in a campus digital scholarship unit that emphasizes digital collections, I'm particularly interested in questions around digital infrastructure for community-led archives. The benefits for campus partners on community-led archives are well documented in the information work of Community Archives, a systematic literature review. Alex H. Poole cites a number of benefits for campus repositories, including the promotion of access and inclusivity, the drawing in of new users, the access to wellsprings of specialist subject knowledge, among other benefits. And although there's still a lot of work to do to build the precedent, there is a robust discussion among academic librarians, archivists, and partnering communities about how digital libraries can engage with community partners, not only as participants or contributors, but as decision makers at every juncture of the collection building process. And there is increasing recognition of the wide range of benefits of partnering with community-led archives, not least of which are meaningful opportunities for graduate and undergraduate students. I won't go into detail about those benefits here, but I write in depth about them in this recent article co-authored with Abu Rizvi. Of course, while there are success stories to celebrate, there are also deep histories of mistrust between institutions and community archives, challenges to equitable partnership as detailed by Gabe, and even failed collaborations among campus libraries and archives and community partners. The Community Archives Collaborative, discussed in the SAA panel I mentioned earlier, emerged from the thinking of Burgess Jules, Michelle Caswell, Samit Malik, Gabriel Solis, and others on how community archives can build and sustain themselves autonomously. Following grant efforts such as the Architecting Sustainable Futures initiative funded by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation to convene autonomous community-based archives to share expertise and coordinate advocacy, a planned NHPRC grant, that's National Historic Publications and Records Commission. This implementation grant will start in January 2022 for the Community Archives Collaborative to, among other goals, establish a website and offer new digital preservation trainings for community archives. So the question of how community-led digital archives can build capacity and achieve sustainability without compromising their autonomy is, pressing for both digital libraries and community-led archives. Gabe and I hold that there's a place for both totally autonomous community archives and institutionally affiliated community archives. Both are legitimate paths forward. But either way, the technical expertise to implement and maintain digital repository infrastructure is an essential component. It must exist within the community archive or be supplied externally through institutional collaboration. Both paths have bottom line needs that must be met in order for sustainability to be achieved. For institutionally affiliated community archives, for equitable collaborations among community archives and academic institutions, administrative support is key, not just from library leadership, but from other campus leadership, provost office, president's offices, information technology units, even campus legal counsel. So digital librarians have an important advocacy role to play when it comes to partnerships with community archives. And something I talk about in this article is a memorandum of understanding template we developed at Lafayette College Libraries to formalize library digital infrastructural commitments to community archives that are non-exclusive and perpetual, And these are both important conditions for community archives maintaining autonomy and achieving sustainability. For fully autonomous community archives, if a community-led archive doesn't have digital infrastructure, technical expertise on staff through it or through an institutional collaboration, what are some models for how they can get what they need using grant funds or other resources? What are some possibilities for community archives to access non-institutionally affiliated digital infrastructure expertise? For instance, might it be possible for the Community Archives Collaborative to liaise with the Sembera community for open source repository development? Could the Community Archives Collaborative and independent community archives in general potentially take advantage of Haiku, which is Sembera's out-of-the-box repository solution in development for organizations with limited technical and infrastructural resources? Is there a role for consultancies with service providers like data curation experts in order to implement a Haiku repository? DCE provides services in software development, training, implementation, maintenance. One model might be to open lines of communication among community archives with digital infrastructural needs, funders like Mellon and IMLS making concerted efforts to support community archives, open source community supported repository development efforts, such as those represented by Sembera, and service providers like data curation experts who can help implement open source repositories. So basically there are exciting conversations happening both in community archives capacity building and in values-driven open source repository development. How might these conversations intersect? Maybe they're already intersecting. If so, I'd love to know, how and where those conversations are happening. So we only have a brief Q&A, but as we refine our own understanding about how to best facilitate autonomy and sustainability for community-led archives, Gabe and I would love to hear from this audience. So welcome your perspectives and look forward to the discussion.